"Get up! Riley, get the hell up!" The instructor's voice was a roar of gravel and fury, cutting through the freezing salt spray. But it was the other voice, the one whispering just inches from his ear, that was pure venom. "You hear that, farm boy? You're done, just quit. Go back to whatever dirt patch you crawled out of." Jake Riley's world was mud cold, and the crushing weight of a six-man log digging into his shoulder. His muscles screamed, every fiber stretched to its breaking point. For 5 days and 5 nights, this was life, Hell Week, the crucible designed to burn away everything but the very essence of a man. And right now, Jake's essence felt like it was turning to ash. The man whispering to him was Ethan Vance, tall blonde with a smile that belonged on a recruiting poster and a soul that belonged in a viper pit. Vance's family crest was practically stamped on every piece of high-tech gear the military bought. He'd arrived at BOT-AS basic underwater demolition, SEAL training in a sports car with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. And from day one, he had decided Jake Riley was his personal project, a piece of grit to be ground under his heel. "Look at him, fellas," Vance projected his voice for the benefit of the other exhausted trainees in their boat crew. "Mommy and Daddy are probably wondering when their little hero is coming home from summer camp. Too bad camp just turned into a nightmare, huh, Riley?" Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. Every ounce of his energy, every flicker of his will was focused on one thing: getting the log up. He planted his feet in the sucking mud of the Coronado beach, the Pacific Ocean clawing at his legs like an icy predator. He could feel the man next to him stumble, the weight shifting, threatening to crush them all. "Up!" the instructor screamed again, his face inches from Jake's. With a guttural roar that tore from the depths of his being, Jake heaved. He drove his legs into the sand, his back arching, the log lifting a precious few inches. The rest of the crew, inspired by the sudden movement, surged with him. The log rose agonizingly back to shoulder height. The instructor stared into Jake's eyes, searching for a crack, a hint of quit. He found none. He turned his glare on Vance. "Vance, you think this is a talking contest? Your mouth is the only muscle you've been working all night. Drop and give me 50. As Vance cursed under his breath and fell to the sand, Jake allowed himself a single, sharp breath. It was a small victory, but in Hell Week small victories were all that kept you alive. As they held the log, shivering under the pre-dawn sky, Jake knew this was only the beginning. Vance wasn't just a rival, he was a threat. And in the life Jake had chosen, a threat left unchecked could get you and everyone around you killed. Before we dive deeper into this story of grit and betrayal, take a moment to hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Knowing you're out there with me, it's a bigger boost than you can imagine. This all played out on the hallowed grounds of the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. A strip of land where legends were forged in pain and purpose. For Jake Riley, it was supposed to be a place to prove himself on his own terms. At 26, he was older than many of the trainees, with a quiet intensity that set him apart. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He just did the work. His enlistment papers listed his hometown as a small, rural town in Montana, and his father's occupation as retired. Both were true in a way, but they were also a masterclass in understatement. Retired didn't begin to describe Admiral Thomas Riley, the Bull, they'd called him. A 4-star legend in the SEAL teams, a man whose career was the stuff of whispers and awe in the Pentagon. He was a warrior philosopher who had shaped modern special operations. And he was Jake's father. From the time he was a boy, Jake had lived in the shadow of that massive legacy. But his father had never pushed him towards the military. Instead, he'd taught him something else. "Jake," he'd said one evening, sitting on the porch of their sprawling Montana ranch, "this world is full of men who inherit a name but never earn the respect that comes with it. A title, a rank, a family fortune, they're just hollow shells. Character, son, character is the only thing you build yourself. It's the only thing you truly own." That philosophy was why Jake was here as just Riley. No special treatment, no knowing nods from the instructors. He'd told only the commanding officer of the training center, who was sworn to secrecy. Ethan Vance, on the other hand, believed belonging was his birthright. His father was a powerful senator on the Armed Services Committee, and Vance Defense Systems, his family's company, was one of the largest military contractors in the world. Vance talked about his father's connections constantly, dropping names of generals and politicians as if they were old drinking buddies. He saw Bud not as a trial to endure, but as a stepping stone box to be checked on his preordained path to glory. He saw Jake's quiet competence not as a strength, but as an affront. How could this no-name kid from the sticks consistently outperform him? Vance, who'd had the best trainers, the best nutritionists, the best everything money could buy. The antagonism started subtly, a forgotten piece of Jake's gear before an inspection, forcing a frantic, last-minute search. A whispered rumor in the barracks that Riley was a loner, that he couldn't be trusted. Careful around Riley, Vance would say, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Guys like that, they're only in it for themselves, no team spirit. It was poison dripped slowly into the ears of men who were being systematically broken down and rebuilt as a team. In the intense, paranoid environment of Buddy S., even the smallest seed of doubt could grow into a toxic weed. Jake's only real friend in the class was a corpsman named Marcus Doc Chen. Doc was brilliant, funny, and had an uncanny ability to see through people's facades. "Don't let him get to you, man," Doc told Jake one night as they cleaned their rifles. Vance is a peacock in a world of pit bulls, all flash, no bite. He's threatened by you because you're the real deal. You don't need to tell anyone who you are, they can just see it. "I'm nobody, Doc, just another guy trying to make it through." Doc just shook his head, a small smile on his face. "That's why you're gonna make it." But as first phase, the initial and most brutal conditioning phase, wore on, Vance's attacks became more direct. During log PT, he would intentionally shift his weight onto Jake, trying to make him buckle. During endless runs in the soft sand, he'd clip Jake's heel. Small things impossible to prove as deliberate, but they added up. Each one a tiny crack in Jake's armor, a test of his discipline. Jake never retaliated, he never complained, he just absorbed it. He remembered his father's other piece of advice. In combat, the loudest man is often the first one shot. The real threats are quiet, patient, disciplined. Your mind, Jake, that's your primary weapon. Don't let anyone else control it. So Jake treated Vance like another obstacle, like the freezing surf or the burning sand, something to be endured and overcome. He poured all his focus into the training, his performance becoming sharper, more efficient. While Vance was busy with his mind games, Jake was busy getting better. The instructors noticed. They didn't know who his father was, but they recognized the bloodline. They saw the quiet professionalism, the unbreakable will, and it impressed them. It only made Vance hate him more. The rivalry was simmering, building toward a boiling point. And in the high-stakes world of SEAL training, when things boiled over, they could be deadly. The surf was a churning, black monster. It rose up in the darkness and crashed down on them with the force of a battering ram. Surf torture, the instructors called it. It was designed to do one thing: find the breaking point. To make grown men, strong men, run up to the brass bell that stood on the beach and ring it 3 times. The sound of a ring out was the sound of surrender, the sound of a dream dying. Jake lay in the surf, his arms linked with his boat crews, the icy water stealing every last calorie of warmth from his body. His teeth chattered so violently he thought they might crack. Beside him, Ethan Vance was shivering too, but his eyes, glinting in the faint moonlight, were locked on Jake. Feeling it yet, Riley? Vance's voice was a low hiss, barely audible over the crashing waves. "This is where guys like you wash out. You don't have the pedigree. You don't have the genes for this." Jake ignored him, focusing on a technique his father had taught him. He visualized a small flame in the center of his chest. He focused all his mental energy on it, feeding it, making it grow until it became a roaring furnace, pushing the cold back from the inside out. It was a mental trick, but right now, it was all he had. A massive wave slammed into them, driving them into the sand, filling their mouths and noses with salt water and grit. They came up sputtering, gasping for air. "This is a gentleman's course," an instructor bellowed from the shore. "You are free to leave at any time. Just ring that bell. A warm blanket and a hot cup of coffee are waiting for you. Who wants it? Who's the first gentleman to leave tonight?" No one moved, not yet. The next day, on the grind-era vast asphalt courtyard where trainees spent countless hours doing push-ups, pull-ups, and flutter kicks, Vance saw his next opportunity. They were in the middle of a brutal calisthenics session, their muscles already screaming from the morning's 4-mile run in combat boots. The instructor called for a gear inspection. They scrambled to lay out their equipment in precise, military fashion. A single item out of place meant punishment for the entire class. As they worked, Vance accidentally stumbled near Jake's station, kicking a small spray of sand over Jake's perfectly cleaned and oiled rifle. "Oh, my bad, Riley," Vance said with a smirk. "Sloppy of me." There were less than 60 seconds until inspection. Sand in the action of a rifle was a cardinal sin. It could cause a malfunction, a jam that could cost a man his life in a real firefight. It was an automatic failure. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, but he didn't panic. His hands became a blur of motion. In a series of practiced, economical movements, he stripped the rifle's bolt carrier group, wiped it clean with a rag from his pocket, and reassembled it. He finished just as the instructor's shadow fell over him. The instructor picked up the rifle, his eyes missing nothing. He worked the action, smooth. He peered down the barrel, spotless. He laid it back down without a word and moved on. When he got to Vance's station, he stopped. "Vance, your canteen isn't topped off. You think you're gonna find a water fountain in the middle of the Hindu Kush," the instructor barked. "The whole class pays for your laziness. Hit the surf." A collective groan went through the class as they scrambled to their feet and sprinted towards the cold ocean. As they ran, Doc fell into step beside Jake. "I saw what he did," Doc said, his voice tight with anger. "That was a low move, even for him." "It's just part of the test, Doc," Jake replied, his breathing steady. "He's just another wave." But Vance was becoming a rogue wave, unpredictable and dangerous. The harassment was no longer just about psychological games. It was escalating into something that could have real-world consequences. The final test of first phase was navigating the notorious O course, an obstacle course designed to test strength, agility, and courage. One of the most feared obstacles was a 30-foot cargo net climb, followed by a slide down a rope. Jake was moving through the course with fluid efficiency. He was on track for one of the best times in the class. As he started up the cargo net, he could hear Vance right behind him. He reached the top and transitioned to the rope. As he began to slide, he felt a sudden, sharp jolt. He looked down. Vance, who was just starting his own slide, had kicked out, his boots slamming into the rope Jake was on. It was a move designed to break his grip, to send him plummeting 30 feet to the hard-packed sand below. Jake's hands, raw and blistered, almost gave way. But years of training of climbing ropes on his father's ranch until his hands bled took over. His muscles screamed, but his grip held. He landed hard but safely on his feet, his legs absorbing the shock. He turned and looked up at Vance, who was sliding down with a triumphant look on his face. The look vanished when he saw Jake standing there, safe. For the first time, Jake spoke to him not with defiance, but with a cold, level calm that was far more terrifying than any shout. "Try that again, Vance, and you'll find out what happens." He didn't wait for a reply. He just turned and sprinted to the next obstacle, his mind already recalibrating. This had changed. Vance wasn't just trying to get him to quit anymore. He was trying to get him hurt, and as they prepared to move into second phase, the dive phase, Jake knew the stakes were about to get exponentially higher. Down in the dark, cold water, there would be no instructors watching every move. It would just be them and the crushing pressure of the deep. Second phase was a different kind of hell. It wasn't the raw, grinding attrition of first phase. This was a more technical, more psychological beast. The instructors called it the thinking man's game. The water was their new home and their potential coffin. Every dive, every knot-tying evolution in the deep end of the training pool, every long-distance underwater navigation swim was a test of skill, composure, and trust in your dive buddy. Unfortunately for Jake, his dive buddy was Ethan Vance. The pairing was supposedly random, but Jake suspected one of the senior instructors had a dark sense of humor. Or perhaps they wanted to see how this rivalry would play out under pressure. "Looks like we're stuck together, Riley," Vance said as they checked their twin 80-cubic-foot air tanks. His voice was smooth, almost friendly, but his eyes held a predatory gleam. "Just try to keep up." The centerpiece of pool training was an evolution known as pool comp, or pool competency. It was a simulated combat scenario where instructors would swim down and attack the trainees underwater, ripping off their masks, tangling their regulator hoses, and shutting off their air supply. The goal was to remain calm, follow procedures, solve the problem, and get yourself and your dive buddy breathing again. Panic was a failing grade. Panic could kill. Jake and Vance descended to the bottom of the 20-foot pool. The world became a silent, blue, distorted place. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss of their regulators. They knelt on the bottom, waiting. Suddenly, a blur of motion, two instructors descended on them like sharks. One went for Vance, the other for Jake. Jake felt his mask torn from his face, the chlorinated water stinging his eyes. His regulator was ripped from his mouth. He immediately began exhaling a slow, steady stream of bubbles to prevent his lungs from overexpanding. He reached for his backup regulator, but the instructor had it, holding it just out of reach. This was problem one. Simultaneously, he felt a tug on his main hose. He looked over. Vance was wrestling with his own instructor, who had tied Vance's primary and secondary hoses into a messy knot. This was problem two. A whole knot. Jake's lungs were starting to burn. He remained calm. He reached for his dive knife, but the instructor blocked his hand. That wasn't the procedure. He had to solve this with his hands and his wits. He looked at Vance, who was already starting to show signs of panic. Vance's movements were becoming frantic, his eyes wide. He was wasting precious oxygen. Jake made a decision. He pushed away from his own instructor and moved toward Vance. The instructor let him go. This was part of the test, teamwork. Jake got Vance's attention and made a series of sharp, clear hand signals. "Calm down, I will solve it, give me the hose." Vance, despite his panic, seemed to understand. He stopped struggling. Jake's hands, nimble and sure even with the water resistance, began to work on the knot. The instructors hovered, watching. This was the moment of truth. Jake's vision was starting to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges. His lungs felt like they were on fire. Just as he felt he was about to black out, the knot came free. He shoved Vance's regulator back into his mouth and then signaled for Vance's backup. Vance, now breathing, fumbled to hand over his octopus regulator. Jake put it in his own mouth, taking a desperate, life-giving breath of air. The world came rushing back into focus. They had done it. They had passed. Back on the pool deck, as they stripped off their gear, one of the senior instructors, a grizzled master chief with eyes that had seen everything, pulled Jake aside. "Good work down there, Riley," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You saved his bacon. He owes you." Jake just nodded, too tired to speak, but as he glanced over at Vance, he didn't see gratitude. He saw humiliation. He saw rage. Jake hadn't just saved him, he had shown him up. In front of the instructors, in front of the entire class, the farm boy had demonstrated superior skill and composure under extreme duress. The fury in Vance's eyes was terrifying. It was the look of a man whose entire self-image had been shattered. And Jake knew instinctively that Vance would do anything to put those pieces back together, even if it meant breaking Jake in the process. The final test of dive phase was a 3-mile open ocean combat swimmer navigation dive. At night, they would be dropped from a boat and have to navigate using only a compass and a depth gauge to a specific extraction point on the coast. The night was black, the water cold and choppy. As they descended, Jake felt a sense of unease. Vance was his dive buddy again. Their lives were literally in each other's hands. They swam in perfect formation, their fins beating a steady rhythm. The only light was the faint green glow from their compass boards. They were about halfway to the target when Jake felt a sharp, sudden pain in his side. He gasped, swallowing a mouthful of seawater. He looked over. In the dim light, he saw Vance's swim fin pulling away. Vance had accidentally kicked him hard right in the ribs. The pain was blinding. It knocked the wind out of him, and underwater, losing your breath control was a death sentence. He fought the urge to panic, to bolt for the surface. He forced himself to regulate his breathing, but each inhalation was a sharp, stabbing agony. He was pretty sure Vance had cracked a rib. He signaled to Vance with his dive light, "Are you okay?" Vance signaled back, "Okay, keep moving." Jake gritted his teeth and pushed on, the pain a constant, throbbing companion. He knew what Vance was doing. He was trying to injure him, to make him fail the dive, to force him to quit from the pain. But Jake wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He focused on the compass, on the mission. Every kick of his fins was an act of defiance. They made it to the extraction point, just inside the time limit. As they crawled onto the beach, shivering and exhausted, Jake collapsed onto the sand, gasping. The pain in his side was almost unbearable. Doc, who had finished a few minutes earlier, rushed over. "Jake, what's wrong?" "My ribs," Jake grunted. I think Vance kicked me." Doc's face darkened. He helped Jake sit up and gently prodded his side. Jake cried out in pain. "Yeah, that's broken," Doc said, his voice grim. "We need to get you to the medics. You're done for tonight." As the instructors helped Jake to his feet, he saw Vance watching from a distance, a cold, unreadable expression on his face. The sabotage was no longer subtle. It was blatant, and it had almost worked. Jake spent the next 2 days in the medical bay. The doctor confirmed it, to fractured ribs. He was given painkillers and told to rest. The instructors came to see him. "Riley," the Master Chief said, his expression serious, "we know what's been going on. We can't prove what happened out there in the dark, but we're not stupid. We can have Vance dropped from the course. Just say the word." Jake looked at the Master Chief. This was his out. He could get rid of Vance for good. All he had to do was tell the truth. But then he thought about his father. He thought about earning his place. If he got rid of Vance this way, it would always be a shortcut, an asterisk next to his achievement. "No, Master Chief," Jake said, his voice steady despite the pain. "Let me handle it. I'm not quitting." The instructor studied him for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his weathered face. "That's what I thought you'd say. Get some rest. Third phase starts next week. It's a whole new ball game." As the instructor left, Jake leaned back, the pain in his ribs a dull ache. He knew what he had to do. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Third phase was land warfare. Live ammunition, explosives, on the remote, rocky terrain of San Clemente Island, the final stage of Bud AS. There would be no more room for error. The game had changed. And Jake was going to make sure he wrote the final rules. San Clemente Island rose from the Pacific like the spine of some ancient leviathan. It was a desolate, windswept rock used for the final, brutal act of the Bud AS drama. Third phase, land warfare. This was where they learned the tradecraft of the SEALs, small unit tactics, demolitions, marksmanship, and reconnaissance. The class was smaller now, whittled down to the toughest, most resilient candidates. The bonds between them were forged in shared misery and mutual respect. Except for one. Ethan Vance had made it through, his arrogance seemingly untouched by his near-fatal screw-up in the pool. If anything, Jake's refusal to rat him out had emboldened him. He saw it not as an act of integrity, but as weakness. The injury had cost Jake. His ribs were still a source of sharp, nagging pain. He had to wrap them tightly every morning, and every high-impact movement sent a jolt of fire through his side. Vance watched him, a predatory smile playing on his lips, waiting for him to fail. The final exercise of third phase was a multi-day simulated mission. The class was broken into small squads. Their objective: conduct a covert reconnaissance of a mock enemy airfield, plant dummy explosives on a key target, and make it to an extraction point without being detected by the aggressor. Foresee a team of seasoned SEAL instructors who knew every trick in the book. Jake and Vance were, yet again, placed in the same squad. But this time, Jake was appointed squad leader. The decision, made by the Master Chief, was a deliberate test. He wanted to see if Jake could lead a man who was actively trying to undermine him. "All right, Riley, you're in charge," Vance said with false cheerfulness during their mission brief. "Don't get us all killed." Jake ignored the jab. He laid out the plan on a laminated map. It was simple, elegant, and prioritized stealth. They would use a difficult but concealed route through a series of canyons to approach the target, minimizing their exposure. "Vance, you and Doc will be on point," Jake assigned. "Your job is to scout ahead, keep us out of trouble. I want radio silence unless you make contact, understood?" Vance just nodded, his eyes betraying nothing. They set out under the cover of darkness. The terrain was treacherous, loose rock, and thorny brush. For hours, they moved like ghosts, silent and efficient. The pain in Jake's side was a constant, but he pushed it down, focusing on his team, on the mission. They were less than a mile from the target when Doc's voice crackled softly over the radio. "Point 2 lead. We have a problem. There's an instructor patrol camped out directly on our route. In a bad spot. No way around them without being seen." Jake called a halt. They huddled together, concealed in a rocky outcropping. This was the first major wrinkle. "We have to go back, find another way, Doc whispered. "That'll cost us hours," another teammate said. "We'll miss our window at the target." It was then that Vance spoke up, his voice confident. "I see another way. Look." He pointed on Jake's map. "If we leave this canyon and go over this ridge, it's a straight shot to the airfield. It's more exposed, but it's faster. We can low crawl the last few hundred yards." Jake looked at the map, then at the ridge. His instinct screamed that it was a trap. It was too obvious, too easy. "No," Jake said firmly, "that ridge is a kill zone. They'll be expecting us to take the easy way. We stick to the canyons. We'll wait for the patrol to move." "Wait," Vance scoffed, his voice rising above a whisper. "You heard the man. We'll miss the window. You're afraid to take a risk, Riley. That's your problem. You play it too safe. Sometimes you have to be bold. Sometimes being bold just gets you dead." Jake countered, his voice low and hard. "We wait. That's an order." For a moment, Vance looked like he was going to argue further. The tension in the small group was thick enough to cut, but he finally subsided, leaning back against the rock with a look of pure contempt. They waited for nearly an hour. It was agonizing. Finally, Doc's voice came over the radio again. "Patrol is moving out. Route is clear." Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Okay, let's move. Double time." They reached the airfield, planted their charges, and exfiltrated without incident, making it to the extraction point with only minutes to spare. They were exhausted, but they were successful. The next day, during the mission debrief, the Master Chief stood before the squad, his arms crossed. "Riley, your squad was the only one to successfully complete the mission last night. Every other team was compromised." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he turned his gaze to Vance. "Two of those teams were caught on the ridge west of the airfield. Tell me, gentlemen," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "who does that ridge provide a perfect, unobstructed field of fire for?" The answer was obvious: the guard towers on the airfield. The Master Chief continued, "That ridge is the single most obvious, and most stupid, approach to the target. We call it Sucker's Ridge. We put that patrol in the canyon specifically to see who would get impatient, who would take the bait, who would choose the fast and dumb route over the slow and smart one." His eyes bored into Vance. "A leader's job isn't to be bold, Vance. It's to bring his men home alive." Riley made the right call. He showed patience and discipline. He trusted his gut. You were about to lead this entire squad into a slaughterhouse because you wanted to be the hero." Vance's face went pale. He had been so sure of himself. He had tried to undermine Jake, to make him look weak and indecisive. Instead, he had only exposed his own fatal flaw, a reckless arrogance that put ego before the mission. In the world of the SEALs, there was no greater sin. The rest of the squad looked from Vance to Jake. The last vestiges of Vance's influence evaporated in that moment. They saw him for what he was, a liability. And they saw Jake for what he was, a leader. Jake didn't gloat. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. He had won. Not by fighting Vance on his own terms, but by staying true to his principles. By proving that true strength wasn't about talking, it was about doing. As they marched back to their barracks, Doc fell in beside him. "You knew, didn't you? You knew that ridge was a trap." Jake just looked at the horizon, the pain in his ribs finally starting to fade into a dull throb. "My dad always said the enemy gets a vote. You have to think about what he wants you to do, and then do the opposite." Third phase was over. They had survived. All that was left was graduation, and the biggest test was yet to come. Graduation day dawned crisp and clear, a perfect Southern California morning. The hallowed asphalt of the grinder, once a theater of pain, was now a stage for triumph. The remaining members of Body S Class 134 stood in immaculate dress white uniforms, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and disbelief. They had made it. They had walked through fire and emerged on the other side. Jake stood in formation, his posture perfect, his gaze fixed forward. The physical pain of his journey had faded, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. He had done it, on his own. He scanned the crowd of cheering families and distinguished guests. He didn't see his father. He'd told him not to come, wanting to keep his secret until the very end. He felt a small pang of disappointment, but understood. In the front row, however, sat Senator Vance, beaming with pride, his arm around his son. Ethan Vance stood in the formation a few rows behind Jake, a smug look on his face. He had made it through, despite the debriefing on San Clemente. To him, all that mattered was the result. He was about to become a Navy SEAL. His father's connections had ensured his slot, and his own tenacity, however misguided, had gotten him across the finish line. He caught Jake's eye and gave him a subtle, dismissive nod, as if to say, "We both made it, but we are not the same." The base commander gave a rousing speech, praising the grit and determination of the graduates. Then, he moved to the podium to introduce the keynote speaker. "It is my distinct honor to introduce a man who needs no introduction in the naval special warfare community. A true legend, a warrior whose leadership and courage have shaped the teams for decades. Please welcome retired four-star Admiral Thomas Bull Riley." A murmur went through the crowd. The trainees in formation straightened up even more, if that was possible. To have Admiral Riley as their graduation speaker was an incredible honor. Vance leaned over to the man next to him and whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "My father knows the Admiral. They've worked together on committee business." Jake's heart began to pound against his ribs. What is he doing here? Admiral Riley strode to the podium. He was a man carved from granite, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. He still carried the immense presence of a man who had led others into the darkest places on Earth. He didn't smile. He simply scanned the faces of the graduates. His speech was short, direct, and powerful. He didn't talk about glory or medals. He talked about sacrifice, about brotherhood, about the quiet professional who puts the team before himself. "The trident you are about to receive," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone, "is not a badge of honor. It is a mark of responsibility. It means that the man to your left and the man to your right are trusting you with their lives. And you are trusting them with yours. Never betray that trust. Never put your ego before your brother. Out there in the dark, your name won't save you. Your money won't save you. Your connections won't save you. Only your character and the brother next to you will bring you home." As he spoke, his eyes seemed to find Jake's for just a fleeting second. A flicker of recognition, a lifetime of understanding passed between them in that single glance. Then came the moment they had all bled for, the pinning ceremony. One by one, the graduates' names were called. They would step forward, and a designated family member or mentor would come forward to pin the coveted gold trident insignia on their uniform. Ethan Vance. Senator Vance strode proudly from the crowd and pinned the trident on his son's chest, the moment captured by a dozen camera flashes. The names continued. Finally, Jake Riley. Jake stepped forward, his heart in his throat. He hadn't designated anyone. He expected one of the instructors, likely the Master Chief, to do the honors. But then, a figure detached from the official party on the stage. Admiral Thomas Riley walked down the steps from the podium and approached Jake on the grinder. A stunned silence fell over the entire assembly. Trainees craned their necks. Instructors exchanged confused looks. Senator Vance's smile froze on his face. Ethan Vance's jaw went slack. He stared, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. The Admiral stopped directly in front of Jake. He took a trident from the presenter. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at the young man standing before him, his son. With steady hands, he pinned the gold insignia onto Jake's uniform. He leaned in close, his voice a quiet rumble, meant only for Jake, but the microphone on the podium picked it up, broadcasting it to the silent crowd. "A trident isn't given, it's bled for. They all know you bled for yours, just like them. No more, no less." He paused, his voice thick with emotion he rarely showed. "Congratulations, son. I'm proud of you." He clapped Jake firmly on the shoulder and stepped back. The revelation hit the audience like a physical shockwave. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jake Riley, the quiet kid from nowhere, was the son of the legendary Bull Riley. The camera, which had been focused on the Vances, now panned to them. Senator Vance looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. But the most profound reaction was on Ethan's face. Every ounce of color drained from it. The smugness, the arrogance, the entitlement, it all dissolved, replaced by a look of sickening, dawning horror. Every insult, every act of sabotage, every whispered taunt replayed in his mind, but now they were cast in a horrifying new light. He hadn't been bullying some nameless farm boy. He had been tormenting the son of the most respected man in the entire naval special warfare community. The man who had just delivered a speech about character and brotherhood. The man whose words now seemed to be aimed directly and damningly at him. The ceremony concluded, but no one was paying attention. All eyes were on Jake and the Admiral and the mortified faces of the Vance family. The game was over, the truth was out, and the consequences were just beginning. The reception that followed the ceremony was a tense affair. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions and sideways glances. Jake found himself surrounded by instructors and fellow graduates, all slapping him on the back, their eyes filled with a new kind of respect mixed with awe. "You sly dog, Riley," the Master Chief said with a wide grin, shaking his hand. "You kept that one close to the vest. Your father must be bursting." "He just wanted me to earn it, Master Chief, same as everyone else." "And you did," he said, his voice serious now. "You damn well did." Across the lawn, Jake could see Ethan Vance standing with his father. The senator looked furious, his face a mask of controlled rage. He spoke to his son in low, urgent tones. Ethan looked like a ghost. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. His new trident felt less like a badge of honor and more like a mark of shame. He knew. Every man in his graduating class, the men who were supposed to be his brothers for life, now knew what he had done. They knew he had targeted, bullied, and sabotaged the son of a living legend. His reputation within the SEAL teams was ruined before it had even begun. Finally, prodded by his father, Ethan began to walk towards Jake. He moved like a man walking to his own execution. He stopped a few feet away, his father hovering behind him. "Riley," Ethan started, his voice barely a whisper. I had no idea." Jake's expression was unreadable. "No idea about what, Vance? That I had a father? Or that my father was someone you thought mattered?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. It cut right to the heart of the issue. Ethan flinched as if struck. "That's not I mean I was an ass. There's no excuse. What I did during training, it was wrong. I am sorry." The apology sounded genuine, torn from a place of profound humiliation. Before Jake could respond, Senator Vance stepped forward, his hand outstretched, a politician's smile plastered on his face. "Admiral Riley, a pleasure to see you again. And congratulations to your boy here, a fine young man. Clearly a chip off the old block." Admiral Riley, who had just joined Jake, didn't take the offered hand. He just looked at the senator with his piercing, icy gaze. "Senator, your son and my son have spent the last 6 months together. Ask him how he treated the chip off the old block when he thought it was just a piece of wood from the scrap pile." The senator's smile vanished. He had no answer. He grabbed his son by the arm. "We should be going." They made a hasty retreat, the senator's political instincts screaming for damage control. Alone with his son, Admiral Riley put a heavy hand on Jake's shoulder. "That was the hardest part of this. Standing by hearing about what you were going through and doing nothing. You did the right thing, Dad," Jake said. "You let me fight my own fight. It's what you always taught me. Character is built in the dark, when no one important is watching." The Admiral quoted his own lesson back to his son. "Today everyone just got to see what you built." He looked at the trident on Jake's chest. "You didn't inherit this, Jake. You forged it. In mud and cold and pain. Now they all know it. Your new teammates, they won't see you as an admiral's son. They'll see you as the man who endured hell week with broken ribs and never quit. The man who saved his dive buddy even when that buddy was trying to drown him. They will see you as a brother." Jake felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It wasn't just about graduating, it was about this. This moment of understanding with his father. The confirmation that he had lived up to the code his father had instilled in him. He looked over at Vance, who was now standing alone, abandoned even by his own father. He looked small, defeated. Jake didn't feel triumph or a desire for revenge. He just felt a quiet sense of resolution. He walked over to Vance. Ethan looked up, expecting another verbal blow. "We wear the same trident now, Vance," Jake said, his voice calm and even. "That's all that matters out there. When we're on a mission, I'm not going to care who your father is, and you'd better not care who mine is. The only thing I'm going to care about is whether you have my back. Can you do that?" Ethan stared at him, stunned by the offer of a clean slate, a path to redemption. He swallowed hard and nodded, his eyes showing the first flicker of genuine respect. "Yes, I can." "Good," Jake said, Don't make me regret it." He turned and walked back to his father, leaving Vance to contemplate the long, hard road ahead. A road where he would have to earn the respect he once thought was his by right. Weeks later, Jake was gearing up for his first deployment, the quiet hum of the C-17 Globemaster a backdrop to the focused movements of his new teammates. No one called him Riley. They called him Jake, or Farm Boy, but now it was a term of endearment. They didn't treat him any differently. He was just one of them, a brother. He had earned his place. He looked at the men around him, their faces calm and professional. These were the men his father had spoken of. The quiet professionals, and he was one of them. This story isn't just about the grueling trials of SEAL training. It's a powerful lesson about the nature of character. It teaches us that true worth isn't determined by our name, our background, or the wealth we inherit. It's forged in adversity. It's measured by our integrity when we think no one is watching. It's proven by how we treat those we perceive as being beneath us. The most profound strength doesn't come from a position of privilege, but from a foundation of humility. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has been tested and has not been broken. In our own lives, we encounter people from all walks of life. It's easy to make snap judgments based on their job, their clothes, or how they speak, but this story reminds us to look deeper, to see the character within. The most impressive person in the room isn't always the loudest or the one with the fanciest title. It's often the quiet one, the one who just does the work, who treats everyone with respect, and who leads not through intimidation, but by example. What did you think of Jake's journey? What quality do you believe is the most essential for a true leader? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is incredibly valuable. And if this story of grit, honor, and character resonated with you, please do me a favor and hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And subscribe for more stories that go beyond the surface. Thank you for being here today. Your support means the world.